overview. It will take time to digest. And when you get to the write-up, there will be more questions, and then we will address it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
All right. So the communalities is my next stop. Now here, we look at the factor loadings, these extractions. And if you go to here, it says, given a certain sample size, we would like these values to be above a certain loading. All that it says is that item that I've included, for instance, item 1, must load onto some factor later on. So if I look at it must link strongly to one of the factors that it's identifying. If it doesn't, then this value will be very low. It means that there's no place for this in the measurement structure that is emerging. And usually a high communality tells us that we're on the right path. Now, if you go to the norms, it's the same as with Cronbach alpha, where it says it needs to be above 0.6 or above 0.7. In here it says guidelines for identifying significant factor loadings based on sample size. We've got a sample size of 165. So we would like this to be in the region of above 0.45. And if I quickly scan this, all of them are above 0.45. So this already tells me from a recommendation from here, I satisfy this. So it means that all of my items, I will be able to allocate to a factor. That's basically what it tells us. Okay.
Dr. Franzen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we're talking stats language, and then we're talking another common language. In terms of factor, are we referring to a construct, right?
Yes, construct. So
100%.
Factor analysis tries us to identify. The end goal is to look at these where they load and see if this makes sense. There's no name for factor 3. SPSS will not give it a name. But for us to assess this, we will say, but hang on, all of these items actually from a theoretical perspective make sense. They load onto the same factor. And therefore we can confirm that they are hanging together. But what I also can see is that they are distinct from this factor. Because the factor analysis, not knowing, it's not artificial intelligence, factor analysis does not know the language that we used here. I use digital. It's purely look at the correlation. Can you see how difficult it is when it comes to quality data? I'm telling you, if you sit under a tree and you try to complete a questionnaire, it will be very difficult to bring out all these nuances. That's why a questionnaire is still a very relevant and how can I say, valid means of collecting data. You can't just start completing a questionnaire on your own and think that you can come up with all these nuanced or interrelated correlations. You will not be able to simulate it. And this is typically where we pick up problems. All right. So what this tells us that all of these items will load onto a factor which will constitute a construct. What we need to do as researchers is to confirm, and I'm putting it in, if you would have seen me, I'm putting it in inverted commas, to confirm that these items that belong together or that hang together aligns to our theoretical and operational definition of the constructs that we wanted to measure. And this is the next step. So now I'm looking at it emerges. Now what I've done here, and I need to make it clear, is I've actually forced it into 5 factors. Because we've got a theory-driven this, I did not say, well, you do what I forced it into 5 factors. Why? Because I know that there are 5 factors. All right. And I see that it explains about 65. So 5 factors explains about 65%. So this is a very reasonable approach to confirming the factors. If you were in another mode where you've designed your questionnaire yourself and it was for industrial psychology, then I would have said 2 or 3 different approaches. One where I force it, one where I leave it, one where I do orthogonal, when I do oblique. So there's different approaches. This one, there was a specific. And 65% is not bad. So it accounts for 65 5 factors account for 65% of the variation of the original 33 items. So this is quite good. But let's have a look at the gold. So I can see that there are items that load on the same factor. Now, if you read these, and it's now easy to see, we can see that they all belong to the same initial factor or construct that I defined. And this is a good thing. And then I look at the next one, E and T. So all of them belongs to the same construct. Benefit, there are 2. Teresa, I think this might be the time to just inform Zwanga that we deleted those others. I don't know if it's common knowledge.
Zwanga, well, me and Dion I had a practical suggestion. I didn't tell Dion, and then Dion also, we thought about the same problem. We came with the same solution. So we're going to tell you about our very good solution. That otherwise we have a major problem.
Okay.
And I think
so
I don't know what he drinks, but.
So if you go back, there were actually 5 items that we measured for benefit. But yes. 3 of those items were about coupons and things that were not really relevant for our context.
Mm-hmm.
And it messes up your model totally.
Totally, yeah. So we had a session, I can't even remember, was it on Sunday or Saturday or, I can't even remember. So after we had a discussion.
I think after we met all the students, remember then you and I met after that whole session of the students.
Yeah. So the decision was made to then exclude those items that are not relevant. So it's a conscious decision that should actually reflect already with the questionnaire design, that those were not relevant. In fact, you might discuss it with the rest, but it should actually not even be mentioned. So that's my suggestion, that there were only 2 items.
Yes, I agree. What you're going to say, you're not going to mention it. You're just going to say you took only 2 of the instruments of the measurement of the instrument.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't mention it ever again.
And according to the experts, these 2 items were sufficient to measure the construct of benefit. That's a very important argument that you must make, because here, and most of the people say that it's a recommendation that you need at least 3 items, but there are exceptions. So if those items or the wording is strong enough, they can measure a construct, and then we leave it. Then my approach is let the examiner query it, and we'll then address it strongly. So for me, it's not a problem. Okay. But what it comes down to is that these 2 items then load. What we found with the other 3 items, that they actually then prevail.
Let me just give you some background. The idea was actually that we should do an international comparison. This is based on international study, but
yes,
most people were so bad with responding, so that we just left them out. So that's why we didn't want to leave it out, because we wanted to do a comparison. But now we're just going to go on without them.
But so should I rather also say that here in South Africa, we do not have digital signage that offers coupons and so forth?
What you'll do is you will not say that you've left that out for a specific reason. So you'll not. So what you will do is you will in your theoretical chapter, yes, you will say it's not engaging enough. We do not have coupons. We don't have this. But here you're just going to say you've just used you've used the 2 variables from this construct, and then in your conclusions, you will say in future, as we develop in South Africa,
okay,
it is important to measure these aspects.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. So what this tells us, sorry, I was actually thinking about, just my apology, I was thinking about that other research that I've shown you. I did not force this, I just let it free flow.
Sure, that's impressive. Without just luck.
Yeah. So what this tells us is that, and this is the only difference. So on a contribution side, one of the reasons why we do an EFA is to then confirm, while we do an explorative factor analysis, but to see if these constructs that we hypothesized, the propositions, is actually emerging. But what we find here is that AC and AFF is not distinguishing. So they are not different. So we've got a different perspective on this. And we said it initially, that your affordance and your active control is so closely related that from a statistical, data-driven perspective, they cannot be distinguished. And this is what we are seeing here. So your contribution is also now to say, while we had this model that we proposed, we now, given the evidence in the data, proposing a new model going forward, where these two are seen as the same. So you will have to come up with a new operational definition where we combine affordance and active control. Does it make sense, Zwanga?
Yes, yes.
All right. And I think you acknowledged it the last time when we spoke about it.
Yes.
Yeah, as well as if you look at the theory, the uses and gratification, so it's already just gratifications that are emerging there. So yeah.
Perfect. Here I've just copied and pasted for you a section from here that just gives us a little bit of guideline ensuring practical significance, that we look for factor loadings above 0.3, loadings above 0.5 are considered practical significant. It doesn't mean that there are no loadings here. I just took them out just to highlight, just for ease of interpretation. So we do expect in some instances that, for instance, this item might load a little bit, but not significantly. So all of these are less than 0.3, which basically comes back here. Factor loadings in the range of 0.3 to 0.0 are considered to meet the minimum. In fact, all of those items, these loadings that I've highlighted, does not even meet the minimum level of interpretation. So all of these things just go back to satisfying what is coming from the statistical theory. All right, so this gives us EFA. I'm coming back to what I've said here, that whatever your argument, remember this, that theory first and then your statistics come second. So the fact that those two constructs can merge, while it was suggested on a theory basis initially, we can still argue it from a theory perspective like Safiso said. It's coming from a certain theory to argue that they can be one construct. All right. This gives us EFA. Now I go on to the CFA, and I'm going to conclude with this, with the CFA. So now we're taking whatever is left in the sample and we construct a confirmatory factor analysis. Now I'm looking at the benefits of confirmatory factor analysis. What is the aim? There's a couple of reasons why I'm doing this. Now I want to confirm that these items load onto a latent factor, and these items load. There's a couple of things that I'm looking for. First of all, like in EFA, I need these items to load highly, and I'm looking at it from a standardized loading perspective. In EFA, and going on to Cronbach alpha, if these load high, 0.7 and higher, I would expect a big Cronbach alpha. I would expect another measure of convergent reliability, which is called composite reliability, and also what we call AVE, average variance extracted. Average variance extracted tells me that whatever we extract here from an interrelational basis, that anything above 0.5 or 0.4 can constitute a construct. So we are just building the argument. Zwanga, you will have, and Safiso, you guys will have to read here. You will not only be able to listen to my explanations. Use whatever I say here. Go back and read the chapters about confirmatory factor analysis. Identify sentences that you don't understand. I will explain it to you. But you also need to build your knowledge of confirmatory factor analysis. So there's a couple of things. What I'm doing here is I'm loading everything, but I'm not assigning any roles to them. I'm not saying that this expectation or user experience is a dependent variable. I'm treating them all in the same manner, a measurement model. And now I'm trying to assess. The first thing is from a model fit perspective. The literature tells us, in statistical theory, that there are many, let's say, indices or values like Cronbach alpha that we can use to assess the fit of the model. So what I'm saying is that analogy that I'm always using of you've got a jacket. So your jacket that you've got, your piece of clothing, jacket, it's got sleeves and it's got a collar, that constitutes your model. This model constitutes a jacket. It's got sleeves, and we want to see to what extent does the data fit this model. So if my body is the data, and if I put on the jacket, I'm trying to assess how well does my body fit this jacket. What came first? The jacket came first. It's the theory. It's not that I'm walking around as a person and trying to fit the jacket that fits. That's not how deductive research. It's not that I'm discarding this theory and now looking for a theory that fits the data. So Fisher, you remember we had a very long discussion where
Yes.
Prof asked you, what theory will you adopt? It's not that you're going to collect your data and then start running around and see what theory does it fit. No. First.
Important it is.
Yeah.
Imagine if you used the wrong theory and collected this data, and then the stat says, ooh, it doesn't match, and you are have a major issue.
So the first point is, and all of these statistics that we are doing is trying to see if the data fits this structure. So we are forcing the data into a defined structure. This is different from exploratory factor. Exploratory factor analysis, we allowed the engine, the statistical engine, to come up with a structure. And then we assessed it according to the theory. Now we're beyond this. Now we say we've got a structure, we've amended it a bit based on the results. We've got these two things together. Now we're looking at it from a factor analysis, a confirmatory, to say if the data fits. And all of these things is about just checking. So we've got things like your p-value, where we have got a hypothesis to say the empirical data fits a predefined structure. We've got your chi-square divided by your degrees of freedom. We look at this because our sample size is big and we will rarely satisfy this. Guys, there's just too many of these. You will have to read up. You've got your global fit index, your augmented global fit index. You've got your Tucker-Lewis, your RMS, and each one of these look at your model from a different perspective. It is not necessary to report on all of them. Find a source. For instance, here says, look at these 4 only. If you look at Awang, he says, only report on these. If you look at Schumacher, he says, these are a sample. You and Bentler. So there's different perspectives on this. Some only report on your GFI, your TLI, your RMCA, and that's it. And if we compare models, they might look at your AIC and your BIC. But we can still sort that out. We can sort out the model that fits the story. So we've got a bit of leeway. But how does the process work? All right, guys, I've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, just to add there, Dion, on that 5 minutes, I'll be short. Yeah, so basically there we look the one that fit the best because all of them say the same thing. Yeah.
The one has got a little bit more salt and vinegar, and this one is an absolute fit. So some look at it from a fit, and some look at it from an error perspective. So this one looks at how well does the empirical data fit a hypothesized data structure if the data were perfect. And this one looks at it from instance from an error perspective. So which model minimizes the error? Same arguments. But what we do is we fit a baseline model. So typically we fit a model where we don't do any model adjustments. Remember, we're going through a model building strategy like in regression. There's exploration. Let me just tell her I will be 10 minutes late. So we go through a process of exploration, estimation, and then validation. So baseline model already gives me very good internal consistency fit. Composite reliability is all above 0.8. My AVE is great. And what it also tells me, this is the square root of your AVE. And if you go to here, you will find lots of arguments in terms of what constitutes discriminant validity. So I'm also looking at that these things can discriminate against one another, meaning they must be distinct. The EFA already gave us a good model. Now I'm getting the confirmation. But what it tells me, while I've got internal consistency, I've got discriminant validity, what I don't have is good model fit. And why is that? So this one I would have loved to be 0.9, 0.9, this one below 0.8, this one below 0.8, is I find some issues. So if you look at here, I can see that, for instance, CI1 and CI2 doesn't even have a loading of 0.6. So what can I do? I can actually adjust the model by throwing out these two items and improving my fit. Do I lose anything? Yeah, I do, but I can still argue that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 gives me enough items to measure or get a proxy for CI. My benefit is okay, so I can go through this. And basically what I've done in conclusion is I came up with a somewhat improved model. So I lost some items, for instance, CI1 and CI2, ENT3, ENT7, AC2, but I didn't lose enough. And look at how good my model is. I still have no validity concerns. I meet the Siemens DF. It says here it must be between 3 and 5 to be acceptable. Remember, it's an assessment. You won't get a perfect model, but it's meeting the minimum requirements. NFI is approaching 0.9. My TLI is in fact almost 0.9. My CFI is 0.9. My RMCA is below 10. My SRMR is... So in the majority of these things, I can have an argument that I've got an acceptable model fit. And this now gives me the argument that if I add these items together and I divide it by the number of items, I can get a proxy variable for CI, which is exactly what I've now got in my database, which I can now go forward with. All right, does it make sense? So it's a...
Yeah, because in the reporting, I think she will mention the CFI mostly because it's the one that is 0.9 showing model fit rather than that one which is approaching the 0.89.
But it is also, so we can decide, but most of these, look, it also tells us that we're not in a perfect world. That it is impossible. Sometimes when we get a perfect model fit, I'm also asking the question, did we not torture the data maybe in a way of trying to tell us something that might not be there? So there's still bias.
She will mention, there's nothing to hide, Sophie, so she will mention all of them. It's very good.
Yeah.
It's really, I think Zwanga, it is because we did very good field work in both malls and we did a lot of preparation, but Dion makes it sound easy, but you don't always get this outcome, Dion. So I think, Dion, definitely I think we let you off the hook for the next meeting. We don't want to steal your time, but really thank you. This was very, very, very interesting. I'm excited and I kind of think Zwanga can finish. If she doesn't finish the end of the year, it is her responsibility.
It's my fault. The honor is me.
Your data is fine. Everything is fine. You must just write it up. You must be excited now. Very excited.
Yes, I must say, Doctor, you make it sound so very easy.
It's because you understand so well. But yeah.
I think what carries, so read a lot. What I found with the invariance is we're okay. So between Gateway and Tiger Valley, we're okay. You can see that it's a very simplistic. We'll explain this. So invariance, in your mind, invariance not a problem. The problem that we've got is common method bias from a measurement. So I think we might be skipping this part here, just make a call on it. But then the rest is almost like you've done. So from construct, descriptive, and group difference, and correlation and regression, we almost come to a point where it is just normal statistics like we've almost done. We'll address this. All right, guys? I'm going to love you and
thank you very much. We're
thank
really
you.
excited.
So now we are leaving the club when the music starts to play. Okay.
All right, guys, many more engagement. We will